about my factory. I started playing Factorio, I think sometime last year, although maybe earlier than that. Certainly not when it first hit early access, but not long after that. And I played it a bunch, and then I stopped playing it, and then recently this new patch came out, and so I've been playing it a lot for the past few weeks, and I finally beat the game, which is something that I'd never done before, even though I'd put more than 100 hours into this game even before this patch came out. I'd never actually launched the rocket, which is the notional goal of this game. And I'd never done it because I, loved building factories, but I never built one that I was happy with for long enough to actually get to the point of launching the rocket. In this game, I would always build a big factory and then get to a point where I'm like, I've got this problem here that I didn't anticipate, and I kind of just want to tear the whole thing down and start again. And so I would, restart on a new map. And I feel a little bit about the same about this game that I do about Minecraft, and that I think actually, in some ways, the most fun part of this game and of Minecraft is the first, hour to 2 hours on a completely fresh map, bootstrapping yourself up. So I'm just going to tell the story of my factory here a little bit. This is the third factory that I built on this patch since it came out, and since I've been playing again for the past couple weeks. Not huge changes in this patch. Actually, I guess pretty big changes. Added some new wrinkles to the game. So this area that I'm in now, you might be able to see on my mini-map here, is labeled Prefactory. The Prefactory used to stand where you stand now, but now it no longer stands. It's been disassembled by robots. But this is how I start most of my games. I find an area that has the 4 major early game resources: iron ore, copper ore, coal, stone, and I do a little bit of, direct burner miners, which are the most basic miners in the game, mining type of miner in the game, and feed them directly into stone smelters, which are the most basic smelters in the game, to make your early starting stacks of metals and things like that, and, mining coal and feeding it all by hand while you bootstrap yourself up, and that's pretty fun. And then I build my usual now sort of pre-factory, which doesn't have a set layout or style even, but it's just I'm trying to build the factory that builds the factory. That's the other way I refer to it. So I'm trying to build a factory that will do the first 2 tiers of science in the game to get you into the beginning of this huge research tree, which are red science and green science. So all these sciences, from automation up down to here to concrete, all of this stuff, you just need the first 2 tiers of science to get, and that's pretty easy. So I build a little factory that powers, runs 3 or 4 research stations and supplies them with that research, which you make from things that you can make from these basic resources. So I build some small smelter stacks and sometimes a tiny bus, and, 1 green circuit factory was over here somewhere. And the main objective of that factory is to unlock all that research and to build the things that I need to really build my main factory. So I need mostly what I'm getting built out of this pre-factory. I have to get steel going as well, which is annoying. But I need medium electric poles, large electric poles, which I have down here on my quick bar. Level 2 assemblers, which are the second automated assembly building that you get in the game, which you're going to build the majority of your factory with until you upgrade them later on, and fast inserters and fast conveyor belts, this fast transport belts, this red kind of transport belt. And again, fast inserters and red transport belt are what I at least build the majority of my factory of. So my pre-factory's job is to churn out as much of that stuff as it can. And then later on it gets demolished. What doesn't get demolished is my coal plant, which is the first power plant that I built. The basic coal plant has changed a little since the last patch. It used to be that you would build 1 boiler and then a long string of these steam engines hanging off of it, like 10 or so, I think, off each one was the ratio. You do like one offshore pump into like a short row of 7 boilers on each side. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, it's slightly nicer now, I think, in that the boilers have gotten a bit bigger and they only feed 2 steam engines. So I built this first row by hand before I even had my pre-factory going, because I don't like to automate mining with burner miners anymore ever. I only want to use the electric miners, which are the sort of standard miner used for most of the game once I'm automating. So you need power for those, obviously. The burner miners just run off coal, which makes it a little bit simpler when you're just starting off. And yeah, just like the other the previous patch's iteration of coal power plants, it's pretty easy to just add stacks and add stacks. So I ended up going up to 4 stacks of steam engines before I moved on to other power, and that's still running to this day. I had to expand coal production over here a little bit. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention, gosh, I was going to start off and say, like, so everyone plays Factorio differently. It's kind of one of those games that you get to sort of set your own objectives. Your objective is to launch the rocket, but, you know, it's a sandboxy kind of game. So I know some people love playing on worlds with, like, super tough biters, which are the sort of enemies in the game. Some people love the trains, and so they like to have super big train situations going on and maps where you really have to travel long distances to find resources. I don't like that. My fun that I have in Factorio is building factories, not hunting for resources necessarily, and not the combat, although I do like that pressure. So this map that I'm playing on, I'm not going to show you the whole map yet because it's spoilers, but I generated with most of the resources, you know, not quite all just set to the highest levels, but basically the game that I want to play is a game where all the resources that I need are there with a minimum amount of fuss, and I don't really have to fidget around with, like, oh, this part is mined out, I need to go set up miners over here now. So I've set the resources to be super rich so they last a long time, and I'm unlikely to mine them out. And I set the enemies in the game, the sort of Zerg-like bugs that slowly spread across the map and slowly evolve and slowly attack the sources of pollution that you produce. There's a whole sidebar I could go on about how you're the bad guy in Factorio, and I think it's super interesting. But anyway, I set them to start, which I didn't do in the previous playthrough, so the second of the third factories that I built on this patch. I had the default biter settings, which is how I've always used to play it. This one, what I did was just set them down to the lowest sort of starting settings, and what I found is that because of the evolution and spread mechanics, that they end up basically getting to the same place. Maybe they don't get as savage as they would be at this point in the game, as if I'd had them on normal settings, but I felt that it was just, you know, I still had to do all the defend against the biter stuff. I just don't have to do it, like, later on than I'd started off with, so I felt better about that. So that's, I think, probably how I'll play going forward if I do play again. So yeah, this was my pre-factory. That's all gone now. Then there's coal factory, and you can see this is all more mining that I've set up later in the game over the area where this pre-factory was initially mining from. And over here we will get into Smeltdown. Actually, let's go to the refinery first because it's on the way to Smeltdown. This is my oil refining setup. Pulls from a couple of pump locations, mostly not too far away. I'm not super happy with this. This is one part of my factory that I'm not satisfied with, quite apart from the fact that there's just a huge mess of asymmetrical storage tanks that got built over time here. I think I needed more refineries in the end. Like, I didn't really anticipate quite how much I would need to expand my oil production to in the late game to build rocket fuel. So I would like, I think, to, you know, have 2 or 3 rows of oil refineries in the future, just to make the expansion a little less, you know, ridiculous, just having one long line. And there's another thing about that, which I'll get to later, but, you know, generally what I was doing for most of the game was just storing up light oil and heavy oil and not really using it for anything. And then, you know, later on I did set up this huge stack of light oil cracking to petroleum. And again, once I get over to the rocket, I'll tell you why I'm sort of not super happy with that. I have a tiny amount of solid fuel production going on over here, but not as much as I should have. And yeah, also flamethrower fuel, very useful for clearing out trees. The flamethrower on the tank, I love for clearing out trees. Oh yeah, my tank I left over here. I was going to drive around in the tank the whole time because the tank is totally badass. Where did I park the tank? Like, where did I park the tank is what you spend your time doing a lot in this game. I found there I parked the tank. I think it's almost unfortunate in a way that you play most of the game at the maximum zoom level when you're playing a ton, because actually the game looks really nice up close, and I love this your little like anime tank, like steampunky anime tank that you drive around. But when you're zoomed out like this, it kind of just blends into the background, especially if you're looking at concrete. If you're driving over concrete even. So here is Smeltdown, which is my big old smelting setup. Smelting is super important in this game. I build this in a style where you can build these stacks initially, with the lowest level furnaces in the game, and you leave a little bit of extra space and have to put in one tiny little stubby extra length of, oh god, I'm gonna crash into so many things, length of conveyor belt to make it all work. Excuse me, don't mind me coming through. And then later on you can deconstruct it all and upgrade to these electric furnaces, which are slightly bigger, and there's the steel furnaces in between. I actually use the steel furnaces for a lot longer than I normally do. In previous games, I'd gotten used to switching over to electric furnaces the moment that I could, but I read something in the Something Awful thread about this game, which is where I get a lot of my tips for how to play this. There's a good community there. And someone mentioned that, like, oh, if you're using coal to generate power, it's really inefficient to run electric smelters because you get less value out of your coal that way. It's better to just run the steel smelters until you're over to other forms of power. And I was like, oh, that's really smart. And it's totally true, because like the steel you can feed a ton of smelters off a very small amount of coal. So you can see I ended up with, I deliberately tried to plan this out so that I could expand it. And, I started off down here and built all these stacks here. And then my steel stacks are over. Actually, that's an extra copper stack. My steel stacks are over here, which have to be double tall, so they're especially hard to fit. And then there still wasn't room. You always need more smelting. So I ended up building another couple of stacks up here. I'm just going to run shit over constantly. And another iron stack. And then there's more steel stacks over here by the bricks. Okay, the tank was a bad plan. We're going to leave the tank behind, so I stopped running over everything. But generally, I was able to expand my smelting. I'm pretty happy with the smelting setup that I had here. I'm not super, you'll notice this about my factories in general, I'm not super keen like some people are on, efficiency. Like I said, people play Factorio in lots of different ways. People have their maps set up differently. I have my preferences for how I like my map settings to be, and I also have my preferences for style and how I design my factories. And generally what I'm concerned about isn't ever efficiency or maximizing use of space or use of resources. I'm just getting attacked constantly. But rather just trying to build stuff so that I can always expand easily, and that just trying to see what sort of throughput I can get to. So that's what these stacks are about. You can see I've put some of these beacons around which sort of provide passive bonuses to the smelters next to them, and I've put some modules in here to provide some passive bonuses. But again, I've not gone all out. When I planned this, I neither built these. Actually, these ones I did, but not all of them. Some of them, you could build these closer together, and one set of beacons would be able to cover the furnaces on both sides. I didn't do that. I was trying to fit roboports in between. Roboports, there's a whole thing about that I'm going to talk about in a bit as well, because I'm kind of annoyed about roboports. But whatever. So, again, not super efficient, but, it's easy to stamp down more of these. And the goal is, to basically, this smelting stack, I think, roughly is sized to consume, oh my god, they're through the fence, to consume 1 red belt's worth of ore and turn it into 1 red belt's worth of any material. Obviously, they're now all upgraded to blue belts, which are the express belts. They're the fastest ones in the game. I'm going to have to go clear out some biters, because at this point in the game, they're attacking constantly. I guess I'll probably go up and show the perimeter wall as well. What's that? Radar. Well, place that, am I? My something you also know is my approach to concreting is somewhat haphazard outside of the main base area. There's just these weird paths that I've dumped when I've happened to had concrete on hand to dump a path, and I've been going somewhere and I've remembered to dump it. Not super efficient. So yeah, this is my wall that I've built around most of my base. Pretty standard, pretty effective. I'm not like some people, have automated defenses and stuff like that. I don't go for that. I actually kind of like the rhythm. I got to a point in this map specifically where I would really enjoy, I'd build my factory for a bit, and then I'm like, right, it's time to go on patrol and hop in my tank, drive the border wall, fix all the spots where the buyers have broken through. Like here, you find a spot where the buyers have broken through, you plop down a couple more cannons, you load them up, your robots automatically repair the breach in the wall, you keep going. Sometimes if a spot is getting beaten repeatedly, you deconstruct the wall and drive out and in the tank and go blow some guys up and come back. And I sort of liked that rhythm. I like the feel of, I'm gonna go patrol the borders of my land and make sure everything is secure on my frontier and stuff like that. I'll briefly talk about my mining. It's not anything super fancy. I used to do the sort of style of tiling these miners. The miners have a footprint. You can see actually when I hover over it in this very pale green, which is hard to make out. But the footprint which the miner will mine from is one tile outside of the size of the miner itself. So for maximum efficiency, what I used to do was to spread the miners out so that none of them are overlapping in their catchment area. But again, something I think I read in Something Awful Terrible, some guy just saying, nah, just run in a row and dump them all down. It doesn't make that much difference. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It doesn't make that much difference. So you run in a row and you dump them down next to each other, and you put, you leave one row for electrical poles in between. And that's how you mine lots and lots of stuff. And again, this is, not optimizing for efficiency, just optimizing for throughput and ease of expansion. So it's super easy to go to a new ore spot and just run and bam, 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 row of electric miners, bam, 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 row of medium electric poles, and then a row of belts, and you're done. You're on your way. You can see here I've just tiled up this whole thing of copper, and this is enough to feed, I think, two full smelting stacks of two of these stacks with copper. Steel is just an arse to make. Like, it's so slow. Like, just trying to... It's only specific times in the game when you're steel constrained, but when you are, it's so annoying to add more steel production. I don't know. I just find it really frustrating. So that's smelting, and so that leads us to the bus. The start of the bus. Here we go. So this factory, what I basically decided to do that was different, and the reason why I think it's worked out better, and I took it to the end when I didn't take any of my other factories, was that I really decided, I was like, what I'd done in my previous factory was like, okay, I'm going to have my smelters, and then I'm also, before my bus, in like dedicated areas, I'm going to have cog production and green circuit production. Actually, I had green and red circuit production. I like designed this green and red circuit producing factory that I could like tile out, and so I would build a bunch of those, and if I needed more green circuits I could add another one in theory, and I built my usual bus from there, starting with all of those things, including the steel and the copper and the iron that I start with here. And it just didn't work for me, really. I just couldn't scale it in the way that I wanted, and my little circuit factory that I designed wasn't good, so I decided to actually commit to the bus concept in a way that I never have before. I've always based most of my factory around the bus, but I never really gone whole hog in it in the way of you start the bus with what you start with, and then you make stuff off the bus and you add it as a new row to the bus every time. And so I planned out beforehand. I like wrote down on a post-it note, like, right, what's everything I want on my bus by the time I get to the end. I want to have, all the basic raw resources. So iron plates, copper plates, steel, bricks, no, that's not bricks, that's cogs, we'll get to that in a second, but bricks and coal also right at the start. Raw resources or resources that you make in smelters, which I didn't want to make on the bus, but then everything else you make on the bus and add to the bus. So we'll just run along and I'll show you the factories later on, I guess, but cogs is the first thing, then it's green circuits, then it's plastic, then it's red circuits, and then we get on to things that are a little bit smaller, I think, later on, so we don't have sort of full width buses. But yeah, then this is pipe over here. I'll zoom in so people can actually see. And then, regular motors, which like most people I think wouldn't really put the regular motor units on a bus necessarily, but I was like, no, I'm going to do it this time. And I'm glad that I did. Batteries, electric motors, and purple circuits later on are processing units. But yeah, I'm pretty happy in general, I think, with the results that I got by just like committing to doing a big old bus. Here's my fluid bus as well, with petrol, water, sulfuric acid, and lubricant going through it. And yeah, normally when I do my sort of factories in these games, I do a bus like this same basic concept, where you have like gaps of 2 or 4 between your rows, and you always leave the main bus above ground and tunnel everything else under it. It's more of a style thing. Like, there are other ways to do your bus that don't have any material differences to them, but this is the style that I like. And so when you take a spur, when you need something from the bus, you do something like this, where you say, okay, in this case I'm drawing from the third row, so you draw from the first row for your first one, second row from the second row. Actually, go back here. You can see, so first you draw from the first row, you put one of these splitters, which takes half of the output on that row, and you send it off to build whatever you're going to build. And then the second time you take it from the second row, and the first row skips this whole thing, and then you remerge, rebalance those 2 rows, and then you take it from the third and the fourth. This time I decided to go for 8 rows of copper and 8 rows of iron plates, because I figured, like, look, if I'm going to be running all of this, circuit manufacturing and cog manufacturing, which is really resource intensive throughout the whole game, I'm going to need, I'm not feeding resources directly into them. I'm feeding them all from the same bus, so I need to have a big old bus. And I think generally it worked out. I think in the future this would change a bit, because when I started this, obviously it was at the start of this patch when the maximum length of tunnel you could do with all the different speeds of belt was only for the 4 squares here. So that sort of limits your sections of bus to 4 each for the large scale stuff. That's obviously changed now. So this is the cog construction. I built this. This was the first thing I built in my main factory, right? I built my pre-factory to get me all this belt, get me all these assemblers, get me all these fast inserters, get me all the steel furnaces that I needed, built a couple of smelt stacks, plugged them in here, built these all with the medium speed. These have all been upgraded to the fastest speed level now, but I built them all with the red speed of splitters and so on, and started my bus with copper and steel and iron plates. And the first thing I built, I was like, right, I'm gonna have 4 lanes of cogs, because you need a lot of cogs. So I'll build 4 sets of production for cogs, and they'll each feed 1 lane. And at the start I just was like, okay, we'll go with 6. We'll go with 6 to a side, so 12 in total for each of these lanes. And I've never had to upgrade this the entire time. Like all my other games, there's always a point where you just struggle for cogs. You always need more cogs, like producing transport belts takes tons of cogs. Everything, it feels like everything takes cogs. But so this game, I was just like, I don't want to ever want for cogs again, and I have not wanted for cogs, and I haven't had to upgrade this to like have more throughput at any point in the game. Really, it's just been fine as it is, and that was awesome. That felt really good, like reward for my commitment to this concept. Here's green circuits. So this did start out with just, similar to cogs. I was like, I want a 4-row bus of green circuits, of the electronic circuits, the sort of first level of circuits that you make in the game. And so I started off with 4 rows of output, and then I like to build from output to input. That's kind of my style. So I start with like 4 rows of output, and then put the 2 pairs of circuit manufacturers on each side, and then the 2 triplets of copper wire manufacturers on each side. And then over time I've added 2nd and 3rd layers, and then I also later added these beacons to speed up production a bit. And I think when I started, I didn't have this weaved, or maybe I had it weaved a different way. I think I had it weaved so that input was fast and output was slow, I think. I don't know. I had to change the weaving at some point. But the weaved input is definitely the way to do it. Like, the long inserters are just too slow to use them in circuit manufacturing, so you have to have a design that gets around that, because you need to just throughput so much iron and copper to fill a whole belt with green circuits, which is what I'm pretty much able to do with this setup, with some use of modules. I don't use a lot of modules, but here, like green circuits, God, you need green circuits always, so was happy to put some in there. And this, it was just luck that this spacing, I think actually I might have had to deconstruct everything and move it by 1 space to add the spacing to fit these in, but it's pretty good because each of these beacons covers 4 of these, so you get a lot of bang for your buck there. We'll keep on moving down the rows. Next up is plastic, pretty self-explanatory. This is another one that I built once, and I don't think ever had to expand. Maybe I doubled this at one point, actually. And then red circuits. So you see, like, all of this stuff I built with things I made in the first factory. Like, I have upgraded these to the 3rd tier of assembly machines, the yellow ones. But all of this I initially built just with the products of my pre-factory. Obviously not the beacons, but the basic layout of these was there from the start. I was obsessive about, like, I'm gonna get all of the stuff that I can onto the bus before I do even science stuff or build anything for myself. I just want to get this bus going and get it set up right for the way that I wanted it to be right. So again, these red circuit stacks, I started off each with just 1 copper cable producer going to the outside. You don't need to do weaving here. I could have, I guess, weaved eventually if I needed to get throughput off enough, but red circuits take long enough to make that the speed disadvantage of the long-handed inserters doesn't make as much of a difference, so it's fine to just have 2 input rows. I also was, you can double up circuits and plastic on 1 belt here, and it doesn't make much difference. Although I did have to put in a little finagle once I expanded these enough to allow me to get 2 whole rows of copper in there. But you can see we're a bit limited on output right now, so these things aren't cranking as hard as they could have been. In general, this factory is not super cranking at the moment, and we'll sort of see why when we get to the end. This was the first thing I built for myself in this factory that wasn't just like all of this stuff. So this is a design I saw on, I think, the Factorio subreddit that I really liked, for a thing that you just feed it cogs and iron plate and green and red circuits, and it makes all of the belt types and all of the belt accessories that you need for the whole game. You start off with it only able to produce these 6, and then later on you can add the top tier. But this thing is great. I really like it. It's really fast, and it cranks through as many cogs as you can feed it. And I had a lot of cogs to feed it, so that worked really fantastically well for me. I was happy with that. And then next up was pipe. Again, this was like, you don't actually need that much pipe. Putting pipe on the bus is maybe overkill. You can totally build a really efficient, really fast factory where you only ever make pipes on the locations that you need it. You just go iron plates into pipes, feeding directly into whatever it is that's consuming pipes right here. I decided to be obsessive, so pipes on the bus, make them here, drink the pipes. Delicious pipes. You can never have enough pipes. I never manufactured pipe to ground this game, and I should have done that, because you need so much pipe to ground. That's these guys here, the underground pipes. They take a ton of pipe and iron to make. I always just make them by hand. This is producing sulfuric acid here. I normally would do sulfuric acid in my refinery. I decided to do it on the bus this time. I don't think it makes that much difference whether you do it in your refinery or on the bus, but I did it on the bus, and that's fine. Motor units here, batteries here. These are just more intermediate products that are used later on. So these are all things, and I think most of these I haven't had to scale at any point. I think I probably started with 4 per row and 2 rows for all of these, and then added a little bit of more regular motor production when I was really cranking on robots. So you can see, even before I made science, I laid out my purple circuits. Like, I got to, the way that you tend to build buses. And, I didn't invent this paradigm, I should sort of say. This is a style that I picked up, I think, from the very first Factorio tutorial video I ever watched. And it's a pretty common style. And it's a style that focuses on throughput, again, which is what I sort of talked about liking, not on efficiency, which I'm less interested in. So I didn't have the technology to build processing units, or purple circuits, as most people call them. Blue circuits, some people call them. I think they're purple for some reason. I guess they're probably actually blue. I'm going to keep calling them purple. But I wanted to have that laid out before I built my science section for some reason. So even though I didn't have the technology to make sulfuric acid to do all this, or no, I did, but I didn't have the technology to build them, I laid all of these out. I did eventually put all these productivity modules in here. I'm not sure if that really helps me at all, but I figured that I could just keep adding more and more and more purple circuits production if I needed to, and I could continue. You can see it. I'm eating greens at about the same speed that I'm producing them at the moment. It's a little annoying that these don't quite feed at the same rate, but that's sort of what you get with buses, that you end up not... I'm always ending up not left-right balanced on my belts in these games, and it's kind of annoying, but not annoying enough for me to do anything about it. So I laid out all of this and had it all running except this, which was laid out but not running, and then I was like, okay, now I'm going to build my automated science. So this is where you make a lot of higher level intermediate products and then feed them into these assemblers, which turn them into these science beakers, and then those feed all the way up here to my research setup. I don't build a ton of research setup. Oh man, I'm really limited at the moment. Gosh, last time I looked here, I had more yellow science coming. Guess I'm a bit struggling at the moment. Yeah, some people like to build a ton of research labs to really, get churning on science. This is enough to get through the research at a pretty decent speed. And now is sort of cranking away at the space research that comes in once you get the rocket. Here's a little, one of my few, like most, I didn't show you bricks, did I? Doesn't matter. I generally stick with pretty neat and tidy approaches, but I occasionally will put down a cheeky thing that doesn't really fit, quote unquote. This is one of such cheeky things where I just have, like, I'm pulling off of the end of my belt of, this is all armor piercing ammo, and I'm feeding it in here to these 2 places, which are also taking uranium and making the top level ammo in the game, of which I have lots now, but not as much as if I'd set this up in a more thorough manner. So this is all my science production up here. Leaving myself, again, like, lots of space to expand my production of the subcomponents if I needed to, and I ended up not needing to. Like, I in lots of parts of this map, I've provided way more space than I needed to, but that's obviously the best option relative to not having enough space. You can see over here. The other thing that I like about the bus as a design concept for factories and Factorio is that it's always easy to find your bottlenecks. Like, you can always, even if you want to do this far, you don't necessarily even have to go this far. It's usually easier to spot, but you can always just go up to your science and say, okay, which, you know, I can see that these colors are all backed up. This one isn't. So I can run along here and I can see, right, this one is slow because it's not getting as many purple circuits as it needs. So I can go over to purple circuits and say, why am I not making more purple circuits? Well, I could expand capacity a bit, or I could need to really get more green circuits because I'm not working all of these quite as much as I want to. So you can continue to do that and sort of track back, and it's easy. Similarly, like I can run down to my bus here and see what could I usefully use more of in my factory right now. Oh, steel. I'm not saturating steel. You want, in a bus system, you want all of your belts to look like this. If you can, that's like the dream, is because this means you're feeding everything as much as it can take, right? Like, all of your belts are backed up with stuff, hopefully like all the way to your smelter. There's just all this backlog of stuff because you can't, your things that are inputting these raw ingredients can't consume them as fast as you can supply them. You're always just trying to like saturate the inputs of everything. And I'm not doing that with steel at the moment, but I am doing that with all of these other things down until you get to purple circuits. This, it might not look like they're saturated because it's only on one side, but that's again just because of my design stuff that always seems to lead to one side being consumed more than the other. But as long as one side is backed up, that does actually mean that input is saturated. It just means that it's not pulling evenly from the two sides of the belt. But except in very rare circumstances, having one side backed up doesn't actually mean that you're limited at the end that you're at. It means that it's backed up all the way to the place that it's being consumed. So this is more, you know, construction of the intermediate products for science. I did have to remake this to when the science changed in an intermediate patch. So these used to be making pump jacks, I guess, and I had to switch this from sending pipes to sending plate, and then one over here somewhere that's now making electric miners, which that was a great change. Like, I didn't automate electric miners in this factory until the patch change made it so that you had to automate electric miners, and I wish I'd automated electric miners because you just need so many of them. I can't even, oh, it's right here. I just walked right past it because I'm not used to looking for this icon. So yeah, now I have tons drink from the electric miners. That, I should say, I know I'm rambling a lot now, but I don't care. The other greatest thing about the bus as a concept is drinking from the fire hose when you're like, you know, I do have logistics set up to automatically keep me topped up on certain crafting ingredients that I need, but I also like to be like, oh, I need, you know, okay, I need advanced circuits for my nuclear reactor. Okay, I'm just going to go here, hold down F and go, nom, 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 nom. And now I have all these circuits, and that's just really satisfying. I'm going to drink all of these. Nom, 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 nom. Oh, it's great. I love it. You know, picking stuff out of chests with one click is boring. What's satisfying is pointing a fire hose filled with iron cogs at your face and drinking. So one thing I didn't put on my bus that I would have liked to put on my bus, with hindsight, having finished this factory, is speed modules level 1. My sort of planning going in was I'm only going to put stuff on the bus that's used in like at least 2 places, and preferably 3. I really don't want to be wasting my time putting things on the bus. For SARS, you don't put copper wire on the bus because copper wire takes up more space than copper plates, so that's just bad. You don't do that. But most of the rest of the things you make are condensing resources. You're always condensing. So that's why the bus kind of makes sense as a concept, even, or one of the reasons why. I should have put speed module 1s on the bus, and in a future factory I would have at least probably 2 lanes of speed module 1s as part of the bus, along with the other circuit types, because you do need them in more places than I thought. I didn't know they were a component in the spaceship. I knew that they went into the science and that they went into the fastest assembler buildings, and they went into the higher levels of speed modules, which is what you really want. And that on its own was kind of enough, but I was satisfied to be like, oh, I'll build them here for research, and then I'll build them here in a big stack to go into the level 2 modules and then the level 3 modules, and I'll just siphon from that to make my assemblers. Here's my little ad hoc assembler factory, which I made up myself, which I kind of like this. You don't need to produce enough of these that this needs to be super efficient, but I was just happy with my sort of 4 into 2 into 1 there. It was pleasing. This is another Reddit design that I saw for a super compact little column that just makes all of the different types of inserters. So that was, I actually handcraft inserters a lot in this game once I ran out of the initial wave that I made in my pre-factory, but this was a nice late addition to have. So yeah, so that's all my science, and I talked a bit about things that I would have put on the bus. The only thing, I have my post-it note here in front of me where I planned the bus and like what things I wanted it to be on it before I started it. And there's only 2 things on here that I have question marks next and that I thought about putting on the bus but didn't. Explosives, which I'm glad I didn't put on the bus because they're just over here, and all that you need explosives for. I never build cluster grenades. I think they use explosives, do they? Never ever built one. Yeah, they do. That makes sense. But you just need them for the cannon shells and the rockets. And I never want to use the lower levels of those things. I always want to, use the uranium explosive cannon shells and the explosive rockets. So you just wait until you make explosives, and then you build a little factory like this that builds you all of those things, and that's plenty. You don't need to put explosives on the bus. But I should have put solid fuel on the bus. More on that when we get to the rocket. But I really, really should have put solid fuel on the bus and been making more solid fuel from the start, but that is lesson learned. So finally, like after I'd been so, stringent and careful about my factory, I was like, right, I'm gonna make all these intermediate products and put them on the bus, and then I'm gonna have, my belt factory, because you need belts super early. I'm not gonna run all the way back to it, but you need a lot of belts, so you've got to have your belt factory early. And then I'm gonna have purple circuits, even though I don't have purple circuits tech yet. Then I'm gonna have all of my science, laid all of this stuff out. And then I was finally like, okay, I'm going to build some things that make stuff that I actually want to need, just quality of life stuff. So automate inserters, automate assemblers, and then start building speed modules. And then this over here, yeah, this is robots. Some people love to go to robots super early. I don't. I have some frustrations with the robots still. So it's quite late before I even build this little stack, which, is just super simple automating. There's obviously more space to scale here to build more frames if you want to, but just making logistics bots and construction bots and roboports. I find it really unsatisfying, the whole way the robots are in this game in some ways. Like you can see what they're meant to do, and you can see the clouds of them flying past me carrying solid fuel. They just always feel like they're not quite actually as effective as you'd like them to be. The only thing that I think is really perfect is, a personal roboport construction, giving you that extended reach, letting you, my whole, the whole perimeter wall that I did, I have a blueprint in here. That's my, that is just double wall where you just, drive in your tank and click and drag this along, and the robots fly out, they build the wall. It's great. So personal roboport construction robots, I'm all behind. I think they're fantastic. The logistics robots are just always annoying. They seem to be bad at spreading themselves out throughout your network. They seem to be weirdly particular about deciding, right, this crate is the crate that we're going to store this type of object in. So whenever I have one of these, I'm going to fly all the way to this part of the map to store it here. And whenever I need to get one of these, I'm going to come all the way here to get it, and all that sort of stuff. And I know that these are actually really difficult, serious networking and logistics problems that people spend their lives working on. So it's not coincidental that just a quick sort of setup of a robot logistics fleet in this game isn't perfect at it, but still it's frustrating. I don't enjoy tiling your whole fucking area with these roboports. That just is really tedious. Getting them all connected up. And then I read a comment recently that was like, oh, you should just lay a fat row of them all next to each other anyway, because then there's more recharging capacity. That's another annoying thing about them. They all have to wait to recharge, and so it means if you're doing intense robot activity in one place, they all queue up behind each other to recharge instead of doing the thing you want them to do. They generally don't move fast enough. You can see now I'm working on robot worker speed 9. I'm into the sort of infinite tech that just gives you tiny increases once you get to the infinite top of the tech tree, which was added in this patch after you launched the rocket. But at the lower speeds, they're just unusably slow. They're so slow. But even now, I've got on my armor here, I've got 2 sets of exoskeletons on. I've got a rocket fuel powered tank. I'm going fast about this fucking map. Oh, I dropped. That was funny. I like the flowers that these make. I'm going to leave that. You run so fast, right? I'm running on concrete, and these robots cannot cannot keep up with you. So what ends up happening, and you don't have Roboport coverage everywhere, right? Because it's impossible, because it's so frustrating to tile out the Roboports. So you run out into the wilderness, you build a bunch of mines, you come back, and you're like, great, you know, I've got all these logistics requests set up and these auto trash requests set up. So I just used a bunch of miners and a bunch of belt, and now I'm back in my Roboport zone. And so all of these logistics bots are going to come, like these guys are doing now with all this ammo that I just dropped, and are going to bring me the stuff. Except what really happens is you run into your base, and you're like, oh, I'm going to go over here now, and I'm going to go over here now. Oh, I'm going to go over here. Okay, what's down here? I need to go around this. And then you end up with this chain of logistics bots. And these are, bear in mind, with like the 8th tier of speed upgrade. And these fuckers just chase you, and then they're like, oh, these ones ran out of battery, so they've got to go recharge over there. And then I'm still going. And then eventually you stop, and then they like all sort of bounce off you, and then you can stand there. You end up sometimes, you're just like, oh, I just want to get that, you know, I just ran out of iron plate. I just need 5 more iron plate. And I know that somewhere there's a logistics bot bringing me 5 iron plate, but it could be on the other side of the fucking map. And it could be taking ages to get here. And it could be waiting to recharge behind the 500 other logistics robots. They're trying to bring me a piece of iron plate right now. And they always end up bringing you too many. Like, it's never the exact number that you ask for. You always end up a little bit over. Like, I want 50 construction robots, which is the maximum stack size that you can use with 2 Roboports, personal Roboports, from your inventory. And I don't want them to take up 2 inventory spaces. So you set it to 50, they bring you too many. I set it down to 49 now, you still always end up with too many. And and the construction robots are just, like, they're good from your personal Roboport, but I made this blueprint to... Oh, did I just delete my entire blueprint book? No, I didn't. I put it here for some reason. I made a blueprint that was just like a ton of concrete. So I was like, I'm tired of concreting this base by myself. I'm going to make a blueprint that does it and just stamp that down. And then all of my construction robots will go build all that concrete, and it'll be great and it'll be super fast. And it's not. It's like trying to concrete a large area of your base with construction robots is not fast or cool at all. It just is super slow, and you end up with a ton of alerts that are like, oh, you're missing materials, you're missing robots, you know. I still have never been able to use the robots in a way that felt fully satisfying to me. Like, again, there are bits of it that work well. The logistics stuff works on a simple level in a small base really well. I don't like it for long-range transport of materials. I don't like it for short-range transport of materials. I like the construction robots from the personal Roboports, but I don't like their general, you know, replacing stuff that gets broken. I think is the only thing they're useful for on a general level. Anyway, that's my rant about the robots in this game. That went on way longer than it should have. Get back to the end of the tour here. So here's, you know, the last sort of few things I built, right? Productivity modules, which use a fair amount. I built a fair amount of... I don't think I used a single efficiency module in this whole game because... Oh, before we go to the rocket, I forgot to show a good tasty part. We'll go back. Good tasty part here, and I'm gonna glance at my notes here. See if there's anything that I was wanted to talk about that I forgot to talk about. No, I don't think so. So I'm going to go down to Nuketown, which you might have seen on the minimap here. Oh, I guess I'll show the whole map now that I've shown most of the rest while we're on our way to Nuketown, although I can't run. If I still had my tank, I'd be driving. But yeah, so this is the whole base, right? This is where we started over here. This is where this tag was there when there was a pre-factory there. Now it's just mining. There's the coal power and the refinery. Here's Smelltown and all of its various extensions and mining and stuff up here. This is the perimeter wall. You can see it goes between this lake and this lake here, and then there's another one here down to this big lake, and then here I haven't finished the perimeter wall, but I've just been running out in parallel to my main base because most of my pollution is down here. So up here it's actually fairly safe, although I have periodically had to go clean in guys like this that are getting into incursions. This is my small solar farm. This is my sort of backup power. You know, I usually early game have burner miners to mine backup coal. Like if all my other power goes down, at least my burner miners are mining coal, powered by coal, and feeding that into the boilers, and I'll have a little bit of electricity. But once you have solar, you get rid of that. This is an old design for solar panels. I don't think that this is actually the most efficient anymore, or ever maybe, but I like it. It's aesthetically pleasing, and it's simple, and it tiles easily. I also super like the way that radar gives you vision on the new map now. And yeah, I love like the bus aesthetically. I think I really just like this map view of my factory, and you just see the bus and you see it grow and all these nice little clearly delineated sections making different stuff. I feel like it's just satisfying. Oh, I was standing on a plate that entire time. Are you catching up on purple? No, you can see purple is backed up to just after this input. So this is the point. Downstream of here, everything is satisfied, but this guy, not a satisfied customer. Needs more purple or blue, depending on your perception of colors science. So the last thing before the rocket I was going to show is my nuke setup. So nuclear power, new in this patch. It's super good. I think it's a really good addition. I think that solar as a late game power solution was just a pain in the arse. Someone, I think, had the witty quip of like, it's annoying having to pave the earth twice, right? In this game, you always want to pave the earth with concrete because it makes you run faster and it's more aesthetically pleasing than all this brown dirt, isn't it? You just want a nice, clear swath of concrete. But then you have to like pave the earth with solar panels as well to get enough power to do all the stuff you want to do late in the game. Like, my God, beacons, I didn't realize, I've never used them much before, but they use so much power. It totally makes sense as a balance thing given how much effectiveness they give you. But man, they eat a lot of power. Man, electric furnaces eat a lot of power. So yeah, you can see I'm making, 600 plus megawatts from nuclear, 100 megawatts from my original steam thing, my original steam engine boiler setup, which I don't think is running at full capacity, and then the solar panels and accumulators make up a little tickly bit in the edge, but you can sort of look on my graph long term here, at production. See, starting off with all the so it's really, nuclear doing most of the work most of the time. So nuclear, you have to start slow. I think I laid this stuff out pretty early on. This is the way that I've been doing it this patch. Obviously, these beacons came later, but you start with a bunch of centrifuges, processing uranium ore. Out of that, you get a small amount of this uranium-235 and a lot of this uranium-238, so the glowy stuff is what you want. And initially, you have very, very precious little of this, and so to make the most of it, what I have been doing is waiting until I have the enrichment technology, Covarex enrichment, which takes quite a long time to get. Like the nuclear research, I do think it's appropriate that it's really slow to get. It's supposed to, it should be a late game thing, but once you get it, you can make a lot of power out of it, which is great. So, I wait until I've got enough uranium 235 to not fill that whole chest, but just to get enrichment going on all 10 of these centrifuges that I built initially here. This little loop here is just to sort of keep them all fed. It's actually finally breaking down. I finally got so much uranium-235 that this process has broken down. And actually, I think I did go a little bit too far with it because you end up... Oh, what's happened here? I've got so much of it that my filter inserter is missed. Oh, it can't put down. Yeah, this whole thing has broken down. That's incredible. Wouldn't expect this to happen. Late on in the game, this was actually so effective that I found that I wanted more uranium-238 to convert into ammunition at certain points in the game. But anyway, you set this loop up, and what it does is make your uranium into more uranium, so you keep running this until it starts to overflow finally, and then you siphon off that overflow down here, and you feed it into this guy to make fuel cells, and you provide him with a little bit of iron and 238 as well, and that makes fuel cells, and that feeds the power plant. So this is one of 2 nuclear power plants. There's another one you can see on the minimap right down here that's exactly the same. That's where this goes to. But this was a concept that I saw in the Something Awful thread. Someone had a really nice, this is not exact replica of it. It was much more nice and efficient than this. But the basic design of it was this spiral design where you start with this 4 reactor core because the reactors get a neighbor bonus. And then you run heat pipe out, and then you spiral it to add more arms. And so I was like, that seems cool. That seems like a good way to make the best use of these 4. And I've heard the heat pipes are a little funky. And you can see that it works pretty well. Like the heat pipes are down to sort of 600 degrees. Once they get to the end here, they need to be 500 degrees to work. So not quite peak efficiency, but pretty good. And off each arm of this, I'm running the most that you can run off one offshore water pump. I'm drawing in water from this big lake here. So this is the largest number of heat exchangers and one fewer than the largest number of steam turbines that you can run off one water pump because it makes it more nicely symmetrical that way rather than having one extra one that sits on the N19. It's not a number that divides nicely. And I put some storage tanks for steam in here because that's what everyone does in their nuclear power plant designs on Factorio. I'm still not entirely sure why it is that people do that. It has to do, I think, there's a thing that people do where they don't keep the reactors fully stocked with fuel because you can keep them at temperature without fuel in them for a while. I never play with, as you may have noticed, if you've played a lot of Factorio and you've seen the tour of my factory so far, you'll notice I don't have any of the whole circuit network stuff. Like, no trains, no circuit networks. That's how I play this game. Maybe that's weird. I enjoy it. I have a lot of fun. So some people use circuit networks to regulate. Oh, this is still messy. I forgot to clean that up when I built the second one. Some people use the circuit network and steam tanks to do clever things with their nuclear power plants and optimizations. I don't do that. So, coming to the end, we get to the part that I would never build because I would always get to, the late game in my factories and get all the research going and then be like, I wish I'd done something else. And I didn't do that this time. Every point that I got to, I could always scale up. I was able to add, the traditional bottlenecks, the green circuits and the red circuits and the blue circuits, blue/purple circuits. I was always able to add more. I was even able to add enough more steel to get steel up to where I wanted it to be eventually, although obviously now I need a bit more. But I was able to scale and scale and scale, and it felt really good. Scale to the point where I had each of these, I have 8 rows of iron plates and 8 rows of copper, and I have 8 smelter stacks of iron plates and 8 smelter stacks of copper feeding all of this, and it's just about enough, and it feels pretty good. So this is my rocket factory. Again, I tried to make it super scalable. So I'm making a bunch of speed units, speed processing units, speed modules, that's the word, here when I really should have put them on the bus. That's one to know in future. Oh, it looks like there's a breach. I would normally go fight this, but I'm not going to. I do like that I can watch it on CCTV, though. So yeah, these should be on the bus, but they're not, so those go in to make the rocket control unit, and that all goes up here to the launch pad. Like, the rocket is a super cool final goal. I love the launch animation. Maybe we'll get to watch it here in a minute, but I generally think that it's great. And my goal, once I built this thing, was, once I knew I was going to build it, I was like, okay, I'm going to build it, and I'll see if I can saturate the input on the rocket silo. Like, get it building and launching rockets as fast as I can. And so I laid this sort of out with the hopes of doing that. So this wasn't this expansive when I first built it, but I sort of expanded it over time as I sort of discovered what the bottlenecks are. I thought, in my foolishness, that satellite construction was something that I needed to worry about as much as rocket construction, so I way overbuilt in terms of space for like you can see here. I was like, okay, I'll start with this for the raw ingredients or the intermediate ingredients for satellites, but I might need way more space because I might need to really crank through this stuff, so left all this space. No, it turns out satellites are actually super quick and easy to make, so that was a bit of a waste of space. But this all wasn't. You can see, like, I'm cranking through a ton to try and make enough rocket fuel, but the thing that I'm limited on at the moment, it turns out, is steel. That's actually not what it was the last time I ran up here. It's interesting that that has changed. Last time I ran up here, I wasn't getting enough petrol into these guys to run them all, and I was annoyed about that, but now it's steel that is limiting me on my construction assembly machines. Maybe I won't abandon this game, actually. I thought that I was done with this, because what I was going to say, what I've been planning to get here to say was, I should have put solid fuel on the bus, because I got to this point and my plan the whole game had been, I knew that rocket fuel was a thing that you needed at some point, even though I've never built the rocket before, and I knew that you needed solid fuel to make rocket fuel. And what I was thinking was, I picked up this 4 liquid bus design from, again, I think like the first YouTube tutorial video for Factorio I ever watched. And the dude was like, oh, you put the 4 liquids that you need in this underground pipe bus, and the 4 liquids that you need for all your stuff are petroleum, water, sulfur, and lubricant. And I was like, cool, that's great. So you make all those, you put them on the bus. And what I was thinking was, well, you can make more petroleum from your light gas and your heavy gas, so you just do, everything into petroleum, right? You crack your oil into, your crude oil into heavy oil, light oil, and petroleum. You crack your heavy oil into light oil. You crack your light oil in petroleum. That was all over at the refinery, which I showed earlier. And I was thinking, right, like, I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to have a ton of petrol and petroleum, which I do have, although I've started to burn through a lot of it now. And I'm going to turn all of that into solid fuel at the location that I need to make it then into rocket fuel. And it surprisingly is working at full efficiency now, and I'm really not sure why that was, because last time I was up here, it just wasn't, I couldn't get enough through the pipes. I think it maybe has to do with like plastic production and sulfuric acid production, and like basically I'm not able to get, it doesn't seem like I'm able to get enough petroleum through one pipe to my bus to supply all of the things on my bus that need petroleum and produce all of this solid fuel. But at the moment I seem to be doing it, so maybe there was some bottleneck that I didn't notice that I've worked out somehow by adding a ton more capacity in earlier parts. But I just found that, I had a ton of oil back at my petroleum back at my refinery, but I couldn't get it here. So I think what I would do in a future factory here is what I saw suggested in several places I should have been doing anyway, which is once you have light oil and heavy oil building up, just start making solid fuel and start transporting it and belt it into your bus. And then use it all to make rocket fuel at the end. And I think that that's smart, and I think that's what I should be doing. I'm kind of, like I said, obsessed with throughput, so I would kind of like to think that what I could do is build a factory. I still want to have this goal. I'm not going to play Factorio for a while now, but eventually the goal, I will come back to this goal of wanting to be able to at least saturate the inputs of a rocket silo. Some people, I think, go for 1 rocket a minute. I think that's also a pretty good goal, but I think personally that seems like a good goal for me. This style that I like to build, I'm all about just trying to saturate the inputs on everything that I'm building, so I want to saturate the inputs on this. And I could, I could, this part of it I could do like just more steel. I could do this part a little trickier, although again it seems to be working right now. But I kind of want to be able to be throughputing constantly. I want to build a factory that can forever and ever and ever, amen, be as long, until mining patches run out. Obviously I've set my resource settings so that they take a long time to run out, but they will eventually. But regardless, for leaving that aside, that I could continually feed this rocket silo with everything it needed to make rockets. So I saw some comments that were like, oh, you should just start building solid fuel and just stockpile it and stockpile it and stockpile it, and you'll have this huge stockpile that you can't get through. And I totally realized that that's what I've been doing with oil, building all those huge oil tanks anyway. But I still think my eventual goal will be not to rely on a stockpile, a big stockpile. I don't think I would build up, if I did go back to this idea of the mega bus factory and do it with solid fuel on the bus, I would not build a bunch of storage into it beyond the storage that the bus itself provides by having lots of space. So yeah, I think that's all there is of my factory to show you. Solid fuels and speed modules 1 are what I would do on the bus next time. I have written down here. Oh yeah, the other thing next time, obviously, thanks to this crazy shit. Look at that. And then this is less mind-blowing, but still, I mean, look at that, right? Everything, this whole bus layout is predicated on this idea that you can only go 4 squares underground. So given the fact that I constructed this entire factory from scratch with red rather than with yellow belts still only have this 4 square range, but this opens up the possibility, for me at least, other people will do more exciting things with it, but for me, I'm just like, oh cool, I can do wider buses. So my idea basically for my next factory would probably be, trying to go that next step up in scale, so probably maybe 12 a 12-lane bus, a 12-lane pipe for iron, and 12 lanes of copper, and then I think 4 of steel is actually fine. I could maybe go less than that, maybe 2 of steel. I might rescale some of these. I think a 2 of steel would be fine. 2 of cogs is probably fine, but I would definitely go up, for example, to 6 rows of green circuits would be fantastic. 2 of coal would probably be fine. 4 of bricks was way overkill. You don't need this many bricks, and bricks in this many places, that would go down to 2 definitely. These guys would probably stay at 4. These guys would probably stay at 2, and yeah, like I said, speed modules would be there as well. But I'm not going to do that in this factory. I think this factory is done. Maybe I will go see if I can slam down another stack of steel production and try and clear this bottleneck, but I'm not convinced that my oil throughput is going to keep up. I feel like it'll fail again at some point. And I can't be bothered planting more pump jacks is just no fun. But yeah, that's my factory. That's Factorio 0.15, I should say. It's a great update, and I already love the change that was made in the mini update to force players to automate electric miner production. I think that's fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to, in a year's time, maybe, when 1.0 hits, or I guess he says 1.0 is going to be this year. Your man, Bob Factorio, said it is going to be this year. So maybe when 1.0 comes out, I'll come back and I will return and try and saturate these damn inputs. I want to watch a rocket launch. We just missed it, but not gonna hang around. I'm gonna end the stream.